trying to figure out what to do with this piece. I believe it sat next to my desk for the better part of 8 years. Really, the bark does what it wants to do and try and shift to whatever the wood is doing in its grain as I work myself down through the layers. One of the groves that I collect from is a down tree next to some porta potties. Subsequently, all of the bark had a very specific odor to it. So every time I work with one of those and I pick it up out of my storage boxes, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is a piece of bark I got by the toilets. I am August Krass. I am a Cottonwood bark artist, and this is the layered onion. Traditional forms primarily are old men, Santa Claus types of figures, flowing beards. That's the traditional form, and that's what I started off with. It's kind of what I knew. From there, I decided I didn't see a lot of people doing anything different than old men. So from old men, I decided I wanted to branch out into monsters. This guy is one of my most recent pieces, Cthulhu piece. I really like the different textures on the piece, and the layering is something that I've really worked a long time towards. And it's difficult for me to be able to wrap my mind around the three-dimensional layering of something like this piece. So I'm very excited about this piece, and I haven't actually posted anything about this piece yet. So this is kind of more of a reveal piece on that one. That's right.
What did you call
Cthulhu. It is an elder god from a Lovecraft short story.
Oh. So you seem to like fantasy, is that accurate?
A little bit, yeah. Fantasy, science fiction.
Yeah.
Try and weasel that way into most of my artwork. It's my English background coming out, English literature, kind of the spectrum of everything, trying to work into the visual aspect of my artwork as opposed to just being able to write. There was a time then I wanted to be a writer, and that that kind of went away down the road. I found that I'm much better at trying to edit and work with other people's writing than I was at actually trying to stick through the process of writing my own. When I'm done with the carving, I actually use a combination of mineral oil, carnauba wax, and beeswax. It's essentially a butcher block sealant. And the primary reason I use that is because it's kind of out of necessity. When I started, all of my carving was done on a coffee table in my living room. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. We really did not have any room for anything that was industrial, and I had no ventilation. And I had a newborn. So out of necessity, I started using the beeswax and mineral oil, and I leave that on for about 2 hours and then wipe it off. And then it takes about a day or two to cure and really set up. But there is no noxious odor. There's no toxic element to it like you'd get with a polyurethane stain. And ever since relocating, having more expanse of a workshop to work in, it's just easy. It's no fuss, no muss, really. I just have to heat it up, and it goes on very simple. This is one of my my older pieces, actually. This is a very nice example of one of my owls. Went a little bit more whimsical because I wanted to go in kind of all different directions. This particular owl is actually my middle daughter's owl. All three of my children requested owls over the course of the past 10 years or so. This is hers. I just recently refinished this, but this is specifically from 2018. And I think it kind of shows a pretty good example of just my growth of detail, because there's not quite as much detail. There's a bit more suggestion of detail in this piece as opposed to some of my more recent pieces. But I really like this one. It's it's just super cute. And my daughter fell in love with it and had to have it. So this is, I brought this one in. This is actually one of the pieces that is featured in the Shallot. And this is a dryad piece with a Celtic triple spiral on her cheek. The spiral is referred to as a triskele. Hopefully I'm not ruining the pronunciation of that. And it's supposed to signify the life cycle, life, death, and rebirth. So starting off with this, what I would do is I essentially have a draw knife that I would take the majority of the outside skin layer of this off. And then I would come in with a pencil and draw in my figure, whatever rough outline that I would have, leaving out specific detail, just try and get a rough outline, what I want the piece to go to. And we can use this particular owl piece. It's about similar size. I would start off one end to the other. Typically with the owls, I like to start off with the beak and the nose, get the head and the wings set, and work my way down the piece. So I do these lines to just define the head, and I define the wings, and then come in for the specific detail of the eyes and the beak. And once that's set, start layering down from there, and inevitably hit some patch of undiscovered crud in the bark, because really the bark does what it wants to do and try and shift to whatever the wood is doing in its grain as I work myself down through the layers. There's a Frankenstein piece that I worked on a long time ago. I think it was around 2015. And every single time I tried to carve out his eyes, something would break. And I would say it was at least 6 months of me just trying to work on his eyes and then putting it aside and going, I can't, this is ridiculous. Every single time. And it must have happened 3 or 4 different times. But being able to look at that piece and then work with that piece. This in particular, going towards your question, this piece came from a piece of bark that had this ridiculously deep furrow. It has this wonderful natural edge that I left in it because it had this furrow that I could not figure out what to do with. And it ran right through the middle. Most of my pieces have noses that I have to try and work around. And this was exactly the opposite, trying to figure out what to do with this piece. I believe it sat next to my desk for the better part of 8 years before I could figure out what I wanted to do with this piece. But it was so interesting just with the furrow. And then I decided right around the time that I worked on this other piece last June, I looked at it and said, well, it needs to be something in a tree. I originally wanted to have this be a face in the bark, but it was just too shallow to be able to work with a brow ridge and a nose and to figure out a workaround and the length of it. It just felt natural to have the skulls. So this piece, I started this piece just with the idea of this piece last June, actually, and I finally finished this piece about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But this is a prime example of starting a piece, having a nice idea about what I wanted to do, and then having it just kind of not do what I want it to. These scales on the top and some of the tentacles just didn't necessarily want to do what I had in mind, and I had to keep carving further down to figure out what the wood wanted to do. I have experimented in a few other pieces, a few other types of wood, but cottonwood bark is my primary. Yeah, my primary
Is there
method.
a particular reason why?
Well, it's soft. It's very easy to work with. And it's really just the medium of the style. The style is called Tree Spirits and taps into the spirit of the tree, really.
You find your bark?
My bark comes primarily from Alaska.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Started with a fairly large store, just collecting bark, anything that I could find from down trees while we lived there, and then shipped it back with us. And subsequently, we try and take a trip up there to visit family, friends, once a year, once every other year, and I go hunting for more bark while we're there. The shape very much determines what I want to do with the piece, the thickness and the shape of the piece. But more often than not, I do pick up pieces off of a tree and hold it in my hand and look to see if I can see just the outline of a chin or the outline of an eye socket or something. Might not necessarily be a specific piece or a specific face, but if I can catch the shadow of something on a piece of bark, then it's worth my while to take it and save it for later. So there's there's a prevalency of something called Devil's Club, which is just a horrible, horrible, torturous plant. And it grows, at least in all of the groves that I've found in Anchorage, it grows around the bases of all of the cottonwood trees. So wrestling this giant thorny plant that has leaves about 2.5 to 3 foot wide, and all of the leaves have thorns that just kind of like poke out, and the primary flowering portion is just this club that sticks up about 3 or 4 feet in the middle of all the leaves, and it is just one giant like mace-like structure of thorns. To wrestle those, which is what I've always had to do to be able to get anything, seemingly makes this more worthwhile than not. But oh gosh, those things are absolutely horrible. One of the groves that I've been able to collect from is actually next to it was a down tree next to some porta potties. And subsequently, all of the bark had a very specific odor to it. It wasn't bad per se, but it very much had a distinct odor for those pieces of bark as opposed to any other pieces of bark that I've gathered. So every time I work with one of those and I pick it up out of my storage boxes, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is a piece of bark I got by the toilets. Oh, all right. Well, they really allowed me to have more of a meditative aspect to my life. When I really get into the groove of carving, time just kind of fades. Everything around me, external stimulus, kind of just disappears. And it allows me to have more of a spiritual, almost centralized view of what I'm doing. And not quite sure how to put it into words, but mostly meditative state. I've never really been able to get into meditation on a whole, but the carving really helps with relaxing and focusing and kind of just letting the rest of everything melt away. Whittling, I consider really the image of an old man in a rocking chair on a porch with a penknife and just mindlessly kind of chipping away at a piece of wood, as opposed to carving, which I sit down with a distinct purpose and specific hand gouges instead of just a penknife, and go for a specific form instead of just kind of free forming with a knife. Why wood carving? I guess it goes back to about 2009. I relocated to Alaska with my wife. She got a job as a physician's assistant at the native hospital there, and just the culture of Anchorage, where we lived, was very artsy, and we like to check out the market scenes. And there was an old man who was from Wasilla that carved cottonwood bark. And I bought a couple of his pieces right after we moved up there. I was fascinated. 2 old men pieces, and had them hanging on my wall for about 2 years. And looked at them every once in a while, trying to figure out how he did it. Couldn't figure out how he did it, or what he used, or anything. But I was just fascinated with the pieces. 2 years into our stay in Alaska, my wife gets pregnant, and we have our first daughter. And I decided to be a stay-at-home dad and needed something to do while my wife was working second into third shift in the urgent care, in between putting our daughter down and then waking her up for 2 a.m. feeding. So I found some cottonwood bark while we were hiking and decided to start experimenting. That's pretty much how it goes. My first set of chisels came from Michael's because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I've got a very cheap set of just hand gouges from Michael's. Was able to do maybe one carving over the course of a month and a half, and destroyed the chisels. They wound up falling apart in my hand. From there, I invested in some flex cut chisels, and have the same set of flex cut chisels that I had in 2011, which is when I started. And have subsequently carved about 320 pieces over the course of the last 14 years or so. Really, my dreams for my art are to keep going, I guess. Other than possibly expanding to be able to be in a gallery space, I'm perfectly happy to be where I am, producing what I'm doing, maybe be able to be a little bit more productive every so often. But I always joke about the fact that whittling is an old man's retired activity, and really I am set for retirement because I have whittling down now and have had that for over the course of a decade. So really staying where I am and holding the status quo on my artwork is really one of my overall goals. You can find my work on my Facebook page, Crass Carvings, and you can also find my work on my website, www.crasscarvings.com. If you're interested in any of my pieces, feel free to email me, crasscarvings@gmail.com. I am August Krass. I am a cottonwood bark artist, and this has been The Layered Onion.